And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 going on 17 novels of suspense. My current book is One Wrong Word, which you can see on the door behind me. But look, you all. Here is The Precious, my brand new book coming out September the 9th. All This Could Be Yours. Look at the spine. It's gorgeous. This is my only copy of this. So I'm keeping it, but I just wanted to share it with you. I'm so happy about this. Hey, Sherry, and glad that you are here today. But we are not here to talk about All This Could Be Yours, although we will at some point. But we are here today to talk about this absolutely spectacular brand new book. This book will bury me. I cannot wait to talk to Ashley Winstead about it in about 10 seconds, but I'm going to take 10 seconds to tell you, crime timers, do not miss this book. It is spectacular. It is engaging and unique and gorgeously written and heartfelt and heartbreaking and smart and clever and realistic and such a tour de force in voice and character. I've never read anything like this. This book will bury me by Ashley Winstead. Do not miss this book. I see Shannon Hansen is here. Shannon and Diane Dick and Deborah Press and Renee Hertzkowitz. Welcome. Shannon says Ashley's book looks great. It is indeed, and we will talk about how it looks in a minute. Ashley, welcome. I hope you are just getting rose petals showered on you and showered for this book. What's it been like?
I mean, hi, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me and for those incredibly kind, generous words. And coming from you, I just pardon me if I melt into this couch. No, it's just such an honor. Thank you, Hank.
My pleasure. Julie says hi from Ellicott City. So you've been off and on book tour since the book came out from Source Books, which makes you know it's good, right? Every Source book is so fantastic. What's it been like on tour, and how do you feel sort of coming out of the writing cave and going out into the world?
Yeah, no, tour's been wonderful, but I'm sure we'll talk about this too. But this book is my most personal to date. And so I did prepare myself a lot to go out on book tour and speak publicly about it. So I'll be completely honest, I was nervous about what it would be like talking about some of the inspiration for this book and how personal it was. But it has been the most cathartic, beautiful experience so far.
And I definitely want to talk about that because that will be just fascinating. So without further ado, let me tell you all, welcome to Crime Time. If you're not used to A Mighty Blaze, if you're brand new, this has been a marvelous day for you to pick as your first day. I see Carrie Calvert is here. Welcome. Betty Fellows, Vicki Gregory. This is so much. Robin Stahl says hello all from very sunny Coeur d'Alene, and we are welcoming you. Robin, you know that A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the marvelous powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all reading and discovering new authors and keeping our book community going. And we have been going strong, all of us, a dozen or so volunteers for 5 years now, and we absolutely love it. And as always, we are so thrilled that you are here today. And today, in honor of Ashley Winstead's brand new book, Ashley and Source Books are giving away a copy of this book to one supremely lucky commenter. So leave a question or a comment or just general applause and adulation in the comments for Ashley, and we will spin the wheel of fun at the end of the show, as always. And one of you will win this novel, not this one, because I am keeping this one because it has markups all the way through it. And I'm sorry, I wrote in it and I underlined things and put hearts.
What a joy.
I'm keeping this one. One of you will win it. Before I let Ashley talk, and I promise I will, I'm just going to read you her bio very, very quickly, and then I will turn the floor over to her with questions. Ashley Winstead is the national best-selling author of Midnight is the Darkest Hour, The Last Housewife, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, The Boyfriend Candidate, and Fool Me Once. Her books have been library read picks, Lone Star picks, Best of Amazon picks, and Best of Apple Books picks, and have received starred reviews from Publishers Weekly, Kirkus Reviews, Book Page, and Library Journal. Her books have been translated into more than a dozen languages worldwide and optioned for television. Ashley holds a PhD in contemporary American literature and lives in Houston. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I am finally going to let you talk about this book, Will Bury Me. You said you practiced for your tour. That's adorable.
Yeah.
Tell us when someone says, what is your book about? What do you say?
I try really hard to keep it short, so here I go again. This book, Will Bury Me, is about a young woman named Jane Sharp who becomes obsessed with the true crime world, the world of amateur sleuthing that exists primarily on the internet. And she becomes obsessed with this world following the premature and unexpected passing of her father. So her father's death rocks her so deeply, and she has so many unanswered questions to why her father had to pass away so early, that she essentially takes all of that grief and transmutes it into this obsession with other people's tragedies and trying to solve other people's unanswered questions. So she gets in really deep in the amateur sleuth community, makes this newfound family of friends, and they're really good at what they do. So that's almost their downfall in their hubris when this new case uh, emerges that just it is a global phenomenon. Everyone is paying attention to this new case. They decide that they're going to be the ones to solve it before everyone else in the true crime community, before the cops who seem to be bungling it. And this obsession that they develop with this case leads them into danger as the whole world watches.
I'm just fascinated even hearing you talk about it. This book
Yeah.
will bury me, and you know you all. Doesn't it sound so incredibly great? Here's Brenda Gaskell and Robin Stoll and Shannon Hansen. This is saying that you are a new author, says Vicki Gregory. So that is our total goal. What was before we get to how the book is written, which is so spectacular, what was the germ of the idea that was the domino that toppled, to sort of mix metaphors, to let you start this book? What was the beginning of it?
Yeah, so this is the part where I tell everyone that I am really okay. And so like don't worry about me. Um, but I this book is a roman clef. So it's the first book that I've written, which is a fictional version of real life events to a great extent. So the first germ of this book I can actually remember sitting at like a dinner table across from a bunch of librarians, having a conversation about true crime and everyone's interest in true crime and why it was so popular. One of the librarians had mentioned she'd started a true crime book club for her patrons, and it had like skyrocketed in popularity. It's the most popular book club they'd ever started at the library. So everyone was talking about it. And this happened to be a period of time where, even though I'm a crime fiction writer, and Hank, I'm curious about you as well, but I had never really paid much attention to true crime. I wasn't involved in it, except for just a few months before this dinner where we were talking about it, when I had become obsessed with the University of Idaho murder case. And it was a landmark case. Everyone seemed to be obsessed with it. And it really, I was finding myself just spending hours on TikTok and Reels and YouTube, going down rabbit holes of this case. And it wasn't until that dinner, when people were talking about why, that it clicked for me that just a few months before that case broke, I had lost my father in a very unexpected and shocking way, and was harboring all of this grief and these unanswered questions about why he had to pass so suddenly and unexpectedly, if there was anything we could have done to prevent it, where he was now, just all those questions you're left with when you lose someone you love. And for the first time at that dinner, I connected the dots of this obsession with true crime and the soothing feeling I got watching other people try to answer questions for grieving families and my own grief. And that's when I realized I wanted to write about that. So Jane's journey in this book is really my journey in a way that is so, so close to reality.
I mean, it's fascinating and so poignant to hear you say this, because when we lose someone that we love,
Yeah.
we ask questions about, why does the world work this way? Why did this happen to me? What is the reason that we live? How do we exist? How do we explain the things that happen every day? The biggest, most massive of intellectual and emotional questions rise to the surface. And one of the things, I've been a television reporter for 40 some years. And so true crime was really all I did. And I constantly thought about the people who were involved in the crime on all levels of it. What does truth mean? And what does reality mean? And how do we search for that? And how do we be fair? So, and the other thing, and then I'll let you talk, is that the thing about crime fiction, the reason we love crime fiction, one of the reasons is, at least, writing it and reading it, is that there's a control. We can control the end, and we want the good guys to win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. How does all that stuff fit into your thought process in writing this spectacular book? And if you're just arriving, this book will bury me, which I know you're clicking right now to latch onto this gorgeous thing. How did all that go into how you were writing?
Yeah, no, Hank, that's so perfectly, beautifully said. I was really, really interested in writing about true crime, for those very reasons, and to really as a kind of self-examination, of what it was in my heart that was drawing me to becoming so obsessed with, both the University of Idaho case, which is paralleled very closely in this book, as well as other cases like the Abraham Shakespeare case. And I was particularly interested in the University of Idaho case because it seems to be this high watermark case in true crime that tells us a lot about, where we are now as a society. And I think there are those cases like the O.J. Simpson case, the John Benet Ramsey case, the Gabby Petito case, where there's so many people paying attention to them, and they become such a huge, part of culture, that examining us, like how we are responding to the case, even more than the case itself, tells us a lot about ourselves in that moment. So I
What
was really, yeah, sorry, please.
What did you learn about the people, the individual people? I mean, the characterization of the people who accompany Janeway, in her found family, is just perfection. What did you find about real life and the people that were involved in these armchair detective true crime stories? And how did you use that?
Yeah, this is my favorite part because this is my most, highly researched book. And the research that I did wasn't just, like the book reading of nonfiction books about sleuthing. And I mean, there's a lot of, and people's fascination in true crime, of which there are so many wonderful books. And I actually have a bibliography in the back of this book in case readers want to read what I wrote or read. But my favorite part of research was hanging out in true crime forums, in Reddit threads, and just soaking up, almost like an anthropologist, how people spoke to each other, what the rhythm of the dialogue was, just all the certain kind of characters that you find on these forums. I found that so fascinating, and I hope that I do a good job recreating that here.
How did you even know where to look?
It really researched. So the true crime forum that is, the place that the main hangout for all of the characters in This Book Will Bury Me is modeled after websleuths.com. So that's like a really famous, really long-standing internet, web sleuthing website. It's kind of the OG. A lot of, thinking and talking happens now in Reddit forums, Reddit threads, as you might imagine. And then TikTok and YouTube have just become like huge forces, just like TikTok has become a huge force in everything. And so just hanging out where people in the threads would link to, I basically acted as a lurking sleuth, for months and months.
It's so authentic. I mean, it's
Thank
so
you.
authentic in the relationships that they have with each other, in the
Yes.
rules, in the etiquette, in the hierarchy, in the snark,
Yes.
in the envy and the jealousy. Talk a little bit about the sort of undercurrent, the human undercurrent, with, in the guise of solving a crime, the
Mhm.
personal stuff that happens underneath.
Yeah, no, I love that question. And no one has asked me that. So for me, I knew that I wanted to give Jane a found family that she was going to have access to via this, people she's never met before, but have become these incredibly important figures in her life, because I was watching that happen in these forums and seeing that even if people didn't seem to know much about everyone else they were interacting with in the forums, the internet, I know, for lack of a better term, like I call it the Wild West in this book, but I think it's also a home, a place we all live and go to every day, and has very similar patterns to like your neighborhood or your home. So there were people who would say like, oh, we haven't seen like sleuth, mistress, or I'm using one of my own handles I made up, but just as an example, we haven't seen her lately. Anyone know where she is? Let's check in on her. And just these groups of friends and almost family like connections that were happening in these online communities. So I wanted to recreate that. But really I modeled Jane's sleuth group that she becomes really close to after a nuclear family. So there's a father figure, a mother figure, kind of a brother, and then even, without too many spoilers, a romantic interest.
I mean, and you can feel that in subtly as you're reading the book. But Jane is so much in grief over the loss of her father, her family, that she gravitates to find another one. And that's one of the things that's so poignant and so touching. And what she does to bring her father in to that group as well. I'll leave that to you to all read when you read This Book Will Bury Me. It's just part of this superly, I mean, let's just talk about structure for a second.
Mm.
This is so unique and so original and has this superly, severely meta, and I say this in the highest of compliments, first person, almost confessional tone. So
Mhm.
much so that it was fascinating to me to read it as a reader and read it as an author, because as an author, I'm thinking, how did she do this? How is the author, and forgive me, but the author Janeway, who is
Mhm.
actually confessing, this is her confession in
Yeah.
of a sense, says, this is me. This is me talking. And we totally believe this is me. And I had to remind myself, this is Ashley Winstead, the author writing this. How did she do that? Can you talk about how your brain worked
Yeah.
trying to, I mean, doing that so spectacularly?
First of all, thank you. My God, I'm gonna get those words tattooed on my body somewhere. But it's really interesting because this book is written as a tell-all memoir. So when you crack open the first page as a reader, you have Jane, as Hank alluded to, you have Jane talking to you, saying like, you are have asked for my story for all this time, and I'm finally going to give it to you. I'm going to give you what you want, which is to tell you the truth about what happened a year ago, during the investigation of this case, the questions surrounding which have never fully been answered to the public's satisfaction. So I have to confess, I did not start out writing this book in the frame or with the structure of a memoir. I wrote it a lot more traditionally, as more just like a chronological narrative, like we're with Jane. It was in first person, but it wasn't told as a memoir a year after the facts. And Hank, you probably don't know this feeling because I'm sure you nail everything on the first try. But for me, I was reading back what I was writing, and thinking to myself, this is so boring. This is so flat. I wasn't accessing this character Jane, which is all the more strange because more than any other character I've ever written, she's more me than anyone. And for some reason, I wasn't connecting with her. And so I took a step back and I thought about how we all consume true crime in documentaries, in podcasts. And I realized that it's always so mediated. It always has that highly stylized
Mhm.
voiceover, that narrator telling you, and then what she didn't know was it would be the last time, and I realized that that's how this story was gonna had to come. That it would be that the idea for the memoir style of Jane taking that voiceover approach was going to be the right way to do it. And when I started revising along those lines, her voice leapt off the page and I was able to connect with her, and she was a different person than I thought she was when I started. She was snarkier, she was more bitter because she's, now a year past these events and she's learned a lot. And so all of these things that are now such an important part of her voice really came to me after figuring out that structure. And someone much smarter than me said, what's so interesting is doing it that way gives you two Janes. The Jane that's talking from the present and the Jane in the past. And part of what makes this narrator Jane feel trustworthy, even though maybe she shouldn't be, is because you think, she's giving you an honest account of this Jane in the past.
I mean,
So,
it's
yeah.
interesting. I mean, that's really fascinating because I was just thinking about how, as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, yeah, because we can either take the journey with her or
Hmm.
we can relive the journey through her jaded eyes. And she
Yes.
can say things to us like, I know you hate this, but I'm just going to tell you this. Or I know I never told this to anyone before. Or you can
Uh,
read this book about that if you want to do that. We shouldn't have done this, but we did.
yeah.
Um, even the title, even the title
Mhm.
has so much conflict and regret in
Yeah.
it. No, she clearly knows that something bad is going to happen as a result of doing this, and we can't wait to find out what it is that she is now confessing. It's
Yeah.
lovely and carefully done. It's also
Mhm.
such a eye-opening examination of the power of the court of public opinion,
Yes.
in every way, how the internet mob or even the internet voices can ruin someone's life,
Hmm.
emotionally and physically, and just change their world by the power of those words and the mob mentality and the danger of crossing lines. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about that, the court of public opinion and the power of the internet and the mob and all those kinds of things that we think about so much these days?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that what you said that we think about so much these days. It's funny because I was reflecting to myself the other day that I've been writing about the internet as a force, the court of public opinion as a force across my books, in different genres, like in romance and there's a kind of arc to the way I've been writing this developing narrative to the way I've been writing about the internet and the court of public opinion, where it starts out as a hero in some of my romances, like the internet is like a force for good that helps make sure that people who deserve better treatment are getting it. But the more and more books I write as the years go on, the more the internet, the character of the internet, as a like writ large force, seems to get darker and darker. And I think that is because my opinion of the power of the internet is getting darker and darker. Watching cases like the University of Idaho case unfold, watching the way that TikTok psychics, who announced in this particular case, announced that she knew who the killer was and gave this person's name, and then that person was doxxed and violently threatened and had all sorts of terrible things happen to him, as just one example of the kind of brutal power of the internet. Just watching things like that unfold, and I think that my opinion of the court of public opinion is growing dimmer and dimmer, even as I recognize, and this book is a testament to this, that it's becoming more and more of a force in all of our lives.
I do think
Yeah.
that we seek out the people who are interested in the same things that we are and who have
Yeah.
the same points of view that we have, and it gets more and more embellished, and we think that we're right. And one of the things and I want to remind you to leave a question or a comment, because you are going to be entered to win a copy of This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead, which you can hear, you will write, is just absolutely amazing and innovative and immersive and terrific and terrifying at the same time. Because one of the things that we forget is, and that you focus on so gorgeously in this book, is consequences of what we say and what we do, and how, how we can rationalize that something is okay, and then even though it's obviously not. Talk a little bit about consequences when it comes to this book.
Yeah, this book is all, to your point, all about consequences. And I think that, we, you mentioned the title, This Book Will Bury Me, and that was a title that has everything to do with consequences. And it wasn't a title that I had, we came up with it months later, after I'd finished the book. And it is really, really directly tied to the very last line of the book and the very last reveal and twist of the book. And so this is a book about a young woman, Jane Sharp, and in a meta way, me, thinking about the consequences of her father's life, first and foremost, and his legacy, and her responsibility to him, and what she was going to, whether or not she had a responsibility to build a legacy for him, and then also her responsibility as someone, on both participating in online sleuthing, and real world sleuthing, um, but with that kind of like the way we all exist online is like one foot in, one foot out. And so
Yes.
it's a lot easier with, in places where you can be anonymous, places where you can put up an avatar instead of your picture. There's a sense that there are, either no consequences or less consequences. And so I think this book is, really interested in examining the consequences that you can't escape or hide from.
Yes.
Um,
I
and yes, both with
I mean, I
sleuthing
like
and
it
death.
because, yes, but sleuthing and death, absolutely so. And also that with those two things, sleuthing and death together, is the police are supposed to do this. They're
Right.
trained professionals. The police are supposed to do this. And the idea that a group of people, and your people in This Book Will Bury Me, all have exceptional skills, for better or for worse, about
Yes.
about crime solving. They're all skilled and talented, and their rationalization is that we're just trying to help. We're
Yeah.
just trying to help, and that is just, the most famous of all famous last words. I was just trying to help.
Yeah.
And that is just throughout this book. You were talking earlier about the Idaho crimes, and let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit, because it is right adjacent. A chunk of this book is right adjacent to that case.
Yeah.
How were you brave enough to step your toes into that situation where that many people know some of the story,
Yeah.
and take it and use it for fiction? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so not only was this the case, the University of Idaho case, was it the case that I had, um, an obsession with, myself, and had a really personal connection to, but it was a case I knew that, um, most people that were potentially going to be my readership were going to have really personal connections to, because more than I was talking about, cases that come around, every generation, that really, really connect with people. And for whatever reason, this book tries to answer the questions of why. But for whatever reason, just really people gravitate to and are interested in. So I wanted to write a book that, um, that took on a case that was that personal, that my own parasocial relationships to the victims of the Idaho case, the families, the case itself was on the under the spotlight and up for dissection and critique as much as I knew I was going to kind of dissect and analyze and critique the true crime community writ large. So I wanted to write about this case where I don't know, something I don't feel comfortable really critiquing any group of people unless I'm also leveling that same critique at myself, really, just as strongly. But that also requires a lot of bravery to like put yourself under that spotlight and say, like, the way that I think that true crime communities can be a little bit exploitative in the name of good. And I see that I have done this too. And let's talk about this and let's dig into this. And like I said, I wanted to write about a case that people would be familiar with and have some skin in the game. And I totally understand that it's an uncomfortable thing to have your own parasocial relationships and actions and interests reflected back to you in fiction, um, with maybe a critical eye. But in reality, we've been talking about the University of Idaho case for 2.5, going on 3 years now, across nonfiction, podcasts, documentaries. Um, and one thing that I think fiction can do that those other mediums can't is really go deep on the meaning making and the dissection of, yeah, like understanding why, not just the facts of the case, but this book is about the why of the case, and particularly the why are we so drawn to a case like this? What is it doing for all of us? Um, it's about the audience more than the
No, I
case
agree
itself.
with you, and I
Yeah,
think that's what crime fiction is for, and that's
exactly.
why you use this book so gorgeously to bring up a subject that we're all interested in,
Yeah.
examine it in a way that nobody's examined it before, and take us deeply and bravely into sort of thinking about how we deal with the world and maybe looking at the world in a little bit of a different way. When you
Yeah.
read this book, you will not look at true crime the same way. You won't look at Dateline shows the same way. You won't look at the news the same way, because you will wonder what is behind it and what is underneath it and who has thought what about it. As I've been a television reporter, as I said, for a long time, and
Yeah.
there's a feeling that people, news reports, all news shows often start with some grisly, terrible car
Mm,
accident, plane crash, something,
yeah.
and the psychologists say that the reason people watch those, the reason people are drawn to those, is
Hmm.
because they're thinking, I'm glad this isn't me.
Yeah.
It's just sort of a reassurance that bad things happen to someone else. And
Yeah.
this is an indicator that bad things happen to all of us.
Yes.
I love that you chose the word brave. I completely agree with that. How do you want people to feel? And don't forget to leave a question or a comment. We're coming to the question part. Margaret is reminding me. How do you want people to? I mean, there's a thing that you feel at the end of a good book where you think, oh,
Hmm.
that was I'm glad I read that.
Yeah.
How do you want people to feel emotionally at the end of this book?
I well, certainly that are glad that they read it. I when I finished this book, it was one of the most um, process cathartic things I've ever done for myself. So, um, if readers can experience a feeling of catharsis, that would be a very tall order. That would be really really gratified. I've heard from a lot of readers who have finished the book that they feel seen, but if they've experienced, particularly if they've experienced grief, heavy grief, the loss of someone that they really cared about, that there is a certain catharsis, and that um, makes me really, really feel honored. But I think with all my books, there's also that I always like to leave readers with like a little last kick that makes them want to shake the book or shake me, maybe. I don't know. So that would be a great reaction too.
It's incredibly memorable. I remember as I got to the end, just gasping, just turning the pages as fast as I possibly could. So, did you know the ending when you started?
I knew who the killer was, but I'm normally a plotter and I always know my endings, but I let myself do a little more discovery drafting in my attempt to grow as a writer with this draft. And I will never forget that light bulb moment of figuring out how things were gonna work out with that final twist. And that came to me during the drafting process. So yeah, it was like one of those like, oh my God, thank you.
I,
Thank
I,
you, brain.
thank you, Brain.
Yeah.
That moment for all of you who are writers, you recognize this moment where you think you're writing and writing and writing, and you think, yeah, okay, this is going to work, and sure do wish I knew what was going to happen after this. And somehow, suddenly, there's a moment where everything braids together, and you think, oh my goodness, is that what happens? Are you kidding me? That's great, and you can't get there, but faster.
Yes.
You just have to. Well, we're running out of time. People are signaling me, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. Do not miss this, you all. It is spectacular. You have just heard a tenth of the fabulousness of this book. Let's take some questions and see what the audience wants to ask. Marcia, hey Marcia, says, how do you choose your titles? They are so interesting. And other people have asked that too. Joel and someone else asked where the title came from. Diane, perfect. What was it called in your head at the beginning?
It was called Untitled Book Number 6.
Awesome.
So anything was obviously going to be better than that. Yeah, I didn't know how to title this one, and normally I always work with the title in my head, but this one I hadn't, and maybe it's because I've learned that my titles never stick for any of my books. So I starting with In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I've gotten this habit. I don't know. Maybe you'd go so far as to say it's a brand where I have these long titles that are a total mouthful to say. And so we knew we wanted a title that was going to sound like In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. But like I mentioned earlier, that final twist and that final line of the book, and when you realize why Jane is writing this memoir and what the consequences, to Hank's excellent question earlier, are of writing this book and telling Jane telling her truth, that is kind of related to this title here, This Book Will Bury Me. And so it's this kind of nod and a wink to the final reveal. So again, it was something that I couldn't have come up with until I'd gotten that part down.
And don't even try to guess, you all. Just let yourself be. This is a total immersion book. Just read the
Yeah.
book and try to guess. Just like real life, you have to wait and see what happens. Margaret, I know that we have some more questions, but I do see a couple of them that maybe we could put up. About Joel is asking, was writing this healing for you? Randy is asking that as well. And Sherry and Joel are talking about this. How did you personally feel after you managed to do this gorgeous tour de force?
Thank you, Hank. This was by far the most healing thing that I have done, after my father passed. It is the most cathartic thing that I've done, and I really credit writing this book and being so truthful and honest about the experience of losing my father, even down to like the nitty gritty of like the body horror of receiving someone you love's ashes, like just that level of granularity, working through all of that via the process of writing this book is the biggest gift that I have ever given myself. So I had to warn my family members before they picked up this book that they were going to see a lot of things that they recognized and people they recognized in this book. But it has ended up being a really healing thing for all of us.
I mean, the idea that you can heal yourself and your family through
Yeah.
a story, that you can heal through fiction, doesn't that just reveal the power of words?
Absolutely.
and storytelling.
Absolutely.
Really
So
quite,
much of our life, right, is the stories we tell ourselves.
yeah, exactly. And also how you could, if you needed to, from time to time, hide in the character of Jane. It's not you, it's Jane. And so
Yes.
you could face it as Jane because she's a fictional character. And then she was allowed to, she helped save you, which is just lovely as anything I could think of. Who else has a great question? How did you originally, oh, Deborah, hey, how did you, welcome, how did you originally begin writing crime fiction?
Oh, thank you so much for that question, Deborah. I will confess, completely by accident. The first book that I ever wrote was a contemporary YA fantasy. And I got my agent with that fantasy, and she sent me back about a 15-page edit letter of all of these changes she wanted me to make to that manuscript after I just finished a very intensive editing process. So I was looking at the that edit letter, and I was looking at my a blank screen of my laptop, and I thought, you know what feels easier? Just starting from scratch and writing a whole new book rather than deal with these edits. And so, in my attempt at procrastination, I started writing a book, these characters that had started to kind of like haunt my brain. And the words flowed like unlike anything I had ever attempted to write. And about 40% in, I looked at what I'd written and I said, okay, this is really fast paced. There is a dead body here and an unsolved crime. I think I'm writing crime fiction. And that was ended up being my debut.
That's
So
excellent.
yes.
That other people procrastinate by like doing the laundry and stuff,
Right.
not by writing a whole other book. Who else? Let's
Yep.
take two more questions, Margaret. Is there another question? Question for you. Was there a character after other than Jane that you found yourself endeared to as you wrote? Perfect question, Julie.
Yes, I love that question so much. I would lay down my life for Mistress or Lightly. Those are two of the sleuths that Jane becomes very close to in her journey. And I, as a crime fiction writer, I've gotten used to writing a lot of prickly characters, characters where you're paying, just as much attention as an author to their flaws as to their virtues. But Mistress and Lightly to me are some of the most endearing characters that I've ever written, and I kind of miss spending time with them now that the book is over.
I
So very
hear
much.
you. I hear you. Well,
Yeah.
I can't wait for you all to meet those two people and the other characters in the book. One last question. Who has one last question, Margaret? Hey, Betty Fellows, did you pick the cover?
Love a cover question. I did, and we had this big long conversation because this book, so much of it, the action occurs in that weird ether space of the internet. We were a little flummoxed at first about what the cover should look like, and then we realized that books like Night Watching and other really great thrillers that have come out recently have done focused on the font treatment,
Mhm.
and that could be a really beautiful idea. And so once we had that idea, my gorgeous talented cover artist came up with this, and I said that's the one. So yeah.
It's very immersive, and that's how the book is as well. Love, love, love. You all, we are out of time. This has been so marvelous. We're talking about This Book Will Bury Me by Ashley Winstead, not to be missed. You can run, 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 click, 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 and get your own copy of it. But one of you will just have to wait about 5 seconds because we're going to spin the wheel of fun and see who the lucky winner is. I always want to hum when this is
I
on.
know. This is so fun.
Margaret says I can't hum. Okay. Here's Susie Ball.
Susie.
You know, Susie, she's marvelous. She lives in Washington State. She's a massive crime fiction fan and
Oh,
has a very big influencer. So you are lucky too, Ashley Winstead, that Susie Baldwin has won your book by the spin of the Wheel of Fun. And we will get that book to Susie, of course. Before you go, let me say, I almost held up my own book again. I'm not going to do that. I might do that. Let me just
we
say,
all want to see yours.
okay, here we go.
Yes.
Yes, all
Yeah.
this.
Oh,
And as you were
gorgeous.
saying, a book about the ether of the internet, this is a book about a book. So what did we put on the front? We put a book. Like we put a book. There you go. Just so you know. But it's about a book called All This Could Be Yours So there you have my own little meta-ness. But next week, we are going to talk to Elizabeth Kaufman about Ruth Run. Look, now talk about a cool cover. That is great. It is about a woman who is a cyber criminal who is on the run.
Yes.
She's a cyber bank robber. And it's a cross-country chase to find Ruth, the cybercrime bank robber. She says, she's an ambitious misfit young thief who exploits a hacked microchip to rob banks and learns too late that the wrong people have been watching her. So be here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET to hear from Elizabeth Kaufman about Ruth Run. You know from the title what that book's going to be.
It's so good, and I love Ruth already, so
Exactly.
I love that.
So thank you all for being here today. We've been talking about this book, Will Bury Me, the terrific book by Ashley Winstead. It is a standalone. Run, run, run. If you are not Susie Baldwin, run, run, run. Click, click, click. Get your own copies of this and follow Ashley on Instagram. She has a wonderful Instagram page with lots of cool pics. Ashley on her socials. Margaret has put them in the chat, and please follow her everywhere. Thank you, Ashley. This has been great.
Thank you so much, Hank. This is so much fun. I could talk to you forever. Thank you.
Definitely. We'll have to make that happen someday.
Yes.
I'll come see you somewhere and we'll do a real life thing together. And that
I would love that.
And all of you can come, right? All of you can come. But next time we will see you is Tuesday at 4 p.m. right here, ET, right here on Facebook, on Crime Time, on A Mighty Blaze. Keep reading. Stay safe. We will see you next Tuesday. And until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book. See you next time.